Bonjour, everybody. Hi, I'm Neshi Lokotz. Welcome to Star Nation's Communications from Home. We're on a very special time for the show today. You know, we're usually on at night, right? But not today. That's because my guest today is from Ireland. And in order for her to be able to be interviewed at a decent hour and not like after midnight, we had to move the time of the show up. So it is Tuesday, May 22nd, and you are watching Star Nation's Communications from Home. Star Nation's organization covers the magazine, the radio network, which is now live stream shows right here on Facebook, also the Academy and the publishing. And so all of that we wrap up is for a service that we provide to the community. And, you know, listeners, I know that many of you are longtime listeners, and thank you for following us to Facebook live stream. Our partners at Be Live, the app that we use, they're the ones that help us to be able to do these cool kind of interviews, right? Which we love, we really do. And if you could do me a favor, even if you're watching the recorded video, it would be very, very helpful if you could like the show and share the show. And the reason why we ask that is because, boy, since we started this, we've learned so much about Facebook, social media in general. And we know that when we like, share, and comment on a show or on a live stream, that it helps us to be in the news feed much more often, which means that people who are looking for the information, the spiritual information, it's easier for them to find us. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I am doing it myself. I've got my phone out, and we are going to do that. I just have to, got to find us. Here we are. So I'm liking and I'm sharing, and what I'm going to do is share it to a group and let them know that we are live streaming right now and asking them to join us. And let's see, we're going to share that to the Radio Network closed group and also to the Academy closed group. There. Good. That was quick. That was fast. And I actually did pretty good spelling. Usually when I'm going really fast like that, you know, the fingers that fly faster than what I can actually spell. So it turned out pretty good. So welcome to the show. My guest today is somebody that I met several years ago. I had taken a spiritual tour in Ireland, and she happened to be the tour guide for this tour of Ireland. And I had gone over, it was like a month after my dad had walked on. And I had already planned the trip, and I had actually thought about canceling it, you know. And my husband Paul said, nope, you got to go. You got to go, and we're going to tell everybody that you're unable to communicate because of the high rates, which is the truth, at the time, the calling rates. And so I left, and I was by myself. That was the first big trip I'd ever taken solo. And it turned out that the tour guide was Amantha Murphy. And Amantha, the way that she brings the stories to us and teaches about the sacred places in Ireland. The name of her business is Celtic Soul Journeys, and she offers not just the tour guides, but workshops and personalized private sessions. And she's designed them for us to get to know the goddess, the Great Mother, and the Celtic myths. She shows us the beauty of Ireland. And so many people end up going to Ireland because, you know, they might have some lineage or heritage to Ireland, either in this lifetime right now, or maybe in some people might call it a past life or a parallel life, that we've spent time in Ireland. And so anyway, I'm going to bring Amantha on. Now, Amantha is with us via Skype and on a telephone call because she lives out in the country. And so we want to make sure that we get as good as a recording of her voice as we possibly can. And so we're actually kind of doing a telephone call. So I'm live. She is live too, but she's on the phone. So Amantha, are you there?
I am. Hi, Neshi. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So good you could join us today. And actually, what we're going to be talking about today is female storytellers. Because basically, in a couple of months, we're going to be doing a feature articles on that in the magazine. And Amantha, I have to say, when I was planning that out, you were one of the first people who popped into my head. Because I just enjoy listening to you when you tell us the stories about the old Irish and the journeys that were taken to modern day. And so if you could give us a little background about how did you become a Seabhan, and that is a wise woman or a yes woman, and in Ireland, and if you could give us an idea of how did you get to where you are right now?
Sure. Okay. I live in Kerry in Southern Ireland, and all of my life, I spent my summers here with my grandmother, my mother's mother. My mother grew up here now with the land that I'm living on. My grandmother lived here on this land. And coming home, because it was coming home every summer, was coming back to a place of sacredness, coming back to a place where I could be exactly who I was meant to be. Not living here, I was a closed-up child. I was very quiet, very shy. I'm dyslexic. And in those days, they didn't understand dyslexia, so school was very, very difficult. The only subject I excelled in when I was young was mathematics, ironically enough. But I couldn't spell. My writing to this day, I can't write properly or spell. But show me how to get somewhere, and I'll know that 20 years later, or share a story, and that story will live within me. So coming back every year to my granny, who was a widow, she became widowed when she was carrying her last child. Certain nights of the week, other women would gather in my granny's house, in my granny's cottage, and we would sit around the fire, and the women would have what was called hot toddies, which was a little drop of poteen, which is the illegal potato whiskey, and a spoon of honey and hot water. And they would tell stories. And that, for me, was my food of life. Not just the land here that held me, but the stories held me. I became part of those stories. Those stories wove me into them. So when I'd go to bed at night, I'd be in those stories. I'd be a part of it as well as an observer to it. And the stories, as I said, they were my food. And you spoke earlier, Neshi, about time. And when you're in the stories, there is no time. Linear time, as we know it, doesn't exist. We know that the universe is curved. And so we're in a different space, and stories can do that for you. They can take you into those spaces. They can invoke and awaken the stories that we carry within our own DNA, within our own bones. Yes. The stories that pump in our own blood. And the stories that we share, they help to access that for others. You asked me earlier about women's stories, and there is a difference for me between women's stories and men's stories. The women's stories, for me, very much are more earthy in the sense of we talk about the feelings, the emotions, how we express ourselves through the stories, what happens to us internally as well as externally. Where a lot of the male stories, and I'll say male rather than men, are about the hero's journey.
Yes.
The battles. The difficulties they had to get to that place. And women, would tell stories when they were cooking together, when they were weaving together, when they were digging the potatoes together. Children would sit at the feet of the grandparents, and the grandmothers would tell them stories of how their parents were when they were children. And children love to hear that. They love to hear about their own parents and the naughty things they did when they were young. And so stories are a natural part of us. It's a natural part of our expression. It's only much later in our story that the stories were written down. Ireland is an old tradition, and so our stories were always shared verbally rather than written down. Our very first language in Ireland was not the written alphabet as we know it now. It was what was called the Ogham language.
Oh, yes.
And given to us by the God Ogma, which is a series of lines, and you read it from the bottom up. So the sharing of stories is something that is innate within us, not just here in Ireland, and it is very strong in Ireland, but I feel that it's in women all over the world. You gather women together and they begin to share stories. And there's nothing more sacred than a woman sharing her story with you.
Yes.
And holding that story, not sharing or telling others, but holding her story. That's a very sacred act. And when women come together, it's a very powerful thing to do together. And it happens organically. It happens naturally. We had in Ireland what was called bards.
Yes.
And in the Celtic tribes, each tribe would have their own bard. And the bard would often be the most important person after the chieftain. And the bard would be a man or a woman. And the bard, it said, would have to know the stories of the tribe going back 33 generations.
33? That's a lot.
33, I know. 33 generations. And from the stories, from the lore, L-O-R-E, gradually became the law, the L-A-W. Because the stories would tell us what was right and what was wrong, what worked in harmony and brought abundance to the people, and what hurt the people, what took from them. So gradually people began to learn through that. And when you sit and share the stories in that way, people can move into the sacred. They can move almost into the shape-shifting of being a part of that story.
Yes.
So they are awakening their own DNA. They're awakening the knowledge. They're awakening the memories that lie within them.
Right. And I honestly...
Later on...
I was just going to say, I honestly believe that when we sit and listen to a storyteller, that we are transported. We are beyond the measurement of time and space, and that it does reach our, as you say, the blood in the bones, our DNA. We're able to connect with that part of us, and I think that people long for that. They want to be able to have that experience of remembering. And I think that's why so many of us end up, in Ireland.
Yes.
Really.
Yes. People want to belong. There's a sense, there's a need for belonging. People have been looking for their tribes for quite a while now, because, not so much here, but more on your land, families have separated. They've traveled hundreds and hundreds of miles away from each other. And that sense of belonging, that sense of being held, of being seen, being understood without question, without judgment. And that's a big thing. And in general, not specifically, but in general, family can do that. Family can hold you. They know you. They know you from when you were young, from when you grew. They know the type of temperament you have and where you can go with that. And they have an understanding of it. And so when you move far away, there's a sense of, how will I fit in? Will people understand me? Whereas, the stories can take you back into that again. They can take you into that place where you are a part of, not apart from.
Exactly so. See, Amantha, I just wanted to let some people know that I see them. We have Corinda, who has joined us, and Corinda is actually he shared the show so others can find us. Cindy Gray is with us, and she also shared the show. Margaret, hello, Margaret. Margaret's with us. Thanks for being here. So is Rob Kendall, and Rob Kendall has a message for you. Amantha, he says, I'm looking forward to your class in October. So he's taking your class. Yeah.
Great.
You're going to love it.
Hi to all of you. Hi to all of you, especially Rob. Looking forward to meeting you.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
You're going to love it, Rob. I've been in class with Amantha. We've co-taught a couple of things. She's been the tour guide. She's been the storyteller. You're going to love it. You're going to love it. And Margaret shared the show too. Thank you guys for sharing. We appreciate it. Amantha, you mentioned the bards, and
yes, I'll go back to that because it's something that's quite important here.
Okay.
In the tradition here, the Celts were one of our last invasions in Ireland. A lot of people think that the Irish go back to the Celts, but in actual fact, not counting Christianity, the Celts are our last invasion. Mm-hmm. We had 5 invasions mythologically, and archaeologically now archaeologists are actually now starting to prove that. We're at a very pivotal time in our story in Ireland where, because of the new instruments and things that they have, they're actually able to prove a lot of the stories that we hold in our oral tradition. So when the Celts came, they brought with them the word druid. And the druids, as we knew them, went into 3 main lines from the school. The Druidic school. Mm-hmm. There were the Druids, who were the ones that were the law keepers and the advisors to the chieftains, who could be either male or female. There were the bards, who were the storytellers, the story keepers, and often musicians. And then there were the ovates, who were the ones who could journey. They would have normally clairvoyance, clairaudience, things of that nature. Mm-hmm. And we were very lucky in the sense of our Druidic schools lasted in Ireland up until the 17th century, which is a lot later than the rest of Europe. And the bards, as I said, were the second most important person in the tribe because they held those stories. Uh-huh. When we had the last of those Druidic schools, the bards gradually became what we know as Shanakees. And the Shanakee would actually be the storyteller. And the Shanakee, even up until the 1940s, you would get Shanakees travelling around Ireland, staying in villages. And whoever they stayed with, they would tell everybody that the Shanakee was there that night. And people would travel for miles to listen to the Shanakee's story, as well as listen to the gossip of the last village he was at or she was at, and to carry those stories on. Mm-hmm. And so storytelling in Ireland is very natural to us. Yes. You get a few Irish together and the stories would start coming out.
So is the Shanakee, can they be male or female then?
Yes. Yes, the Shanakee would be male or female. And I actually had the blessing to know a Shanakee, mm-hmm. Hacky Burns, who's dead now, bless him, but he was a Donegal man. He died in his late 90s. An amazing man. Had a sense of humour up until the last, Yeah. So yes, the Shanakees, and what's happening in Ireland now is that a lot of our older traditions are being awoken again. People are again starting to walk the land, starting to go again to the site, starting to work on the ceremonies, the ancient wheel, and starting to celebrate the points on the wheel. We're starting to have schools that are hedge schools that are opening up, and Shanakee teachings are coming again. Fantastic. So it's lovely that the wheel turns, and we're taking the good, the beauty, the sacredness of what was and bringing it into the now.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic to know.
It's very exciting.
We have a question for you from Rob. He's asking, sure. He says, I know he's Welsh, but have you read Robert Graves or heard of Robert Graves, The White Goddess, and what's your opinion of it, if you've heard of him?
Well, I have heard of it, and I do believe I used to own the book. I don't know if I still do, but I've never read it. Mm-hmm. And I do apologize for that. But I just don't read books that are heavy. I can't. My dyslexia is such that anything I read, I don't remember. I can tell you if a fictional book was a good read, but within days of finishing it, I don't remember the heroine's name, things of that nature. So any heavy book will make me just close down, and that is a heavy book. I don't know anything about it other than many people have said that it's good, but other people question it, and I can't personally say
one way or the other.
No. Now, I do know that there's a book about the Shanachie, and it is a light book. It's not heavy at all. Frank Delaney is the man's name, and I know because my brother gave me the book. And it's a delightful book to read.
And what was it? It was by Frank Delaney?
Delaney, and I think it's actually called the Shanachie.
And I... Neither one of us know how to spell Shanachie. I will look it up and put it in the comments later.
And there's another book too that Edward Rutherford, he wrote a book about Ireland. The first one was Dublin, and then the second one I think was called Ireland. He took 3 fictitious families, and he wove the actual story of Ireland around these 3 fictitious families.
And what was that name?
That's an excellent book. Edward Rutherford. Apparently he did a book about New York as well, London. Yeah, so I'm told that's very, very good, and I've read parts of it.
That's okay.
Again, I can't quote from it, I'm afraid.
Yeah, we'll look up how to spell Shanachie too. And Margaret wants to let you know that, Margaret Spooner wants to let you know that she is taking your class as well. So you have Rob and Margaret here. Yay.
Yeah, welcome, Margaret. It'll be nice to meet you both.
Yeah. Now, when you're talking about the Bard and about the Renaissance, let's call it that, of those services that you can do, you said something in there that I think maybe many of our audiences may not have heard before, and that was hedge school.
Okay.
Yeah, they might not know what that is. Could you explain that to them?
I can, of course. In the 1800s, Ireland was held by the British for 700 years, and England was never able to fully contain the Irish, try as they would. And even though we were the nearest country to them, we had continuous rebellions. To the point where in the middle of the 1800s, they actually brought over hunters to kill off all our wolves because they felt that the wolves were synonymous with the rebellion. But the rebellion continued. And at one point, the Irish were not allowed to be educated. And so Irish being the Irish, of course, had to find a way around it. So they started what's called hedge schools, where they'd have somebody in the community who was educated, who had been to school, and if they hadn't, then they would somehow get them out to France or Spain, who were both Catholic and sympathetic with the Irish, and they would come back and they would teach the children in the hedges, quite literally, and the whole community would hide the teacher. So the teacher would stay in one house or another, and so they were called hedge schools. Oh my goodness.
And so there's a resurgence of the hedge schools.
There is.
That would be so cool. I would enjoy sitting in the hedge and listening, learning.
Now, I don't know if it's actually in the hedge anymore now, because there's been a lot of
come on.
But I'm sure it's as near as they can get it.
Maybe they have the paintings in the school that make it look like it's a hedge.
Sure.
Who knows?
And I think it's there is one woman who started it, Sharon Blackie, I think her name is, and she's further up into the northwest. And I think at the moment she's doing it for adults so that they can come back and remember the stories themselves.
Now, as a storyteller, you said something about the Shanachie can be either male or female, right? And that when the females tell the story, that it's more about the land, about the Great Mother, and the nurturing parts of the stories, whereas the male would be more about the battles and the hero's journey and that sort of thing.
Yes.
So when a female tells, when a woman, Shanaki, tells a male story, because I know that you've done this, is there a way that you have to shift your energy to be able to really tell that story?
I suppose we do it with humour.
Yeah.
And a bit of a twinkle in our eye, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
A bit of a wink here and there, do you know. The woman's story is often based more on the humanness, and the man's story is often based on the urge to find or to move forward, the search.
Mm-hmm.
So the man's story is often, and I say often because it's not always, and you get some beautiful male Shanakis, like Paki was. But in general, it's often the search, the urge, moving forth, the urge to go towards or to find. Whereas the woman's story is often the opposite. It's the going in and the connection we have with each other from that space. So, we would talk about things that they would recognize, other women would connect to, and they would nod. Yes, they've felt that, and yes, they know that, and yes, they've been through birth, or yes, they've been through death. They recognize it. There's an acknowledgement, a sharing on that level, and that does make a difference.
Yes, it does. It does. Because I'm remembering the times that I've listened to you tell us stories, and when you're working with the wheel, I know that there's stories with each of the directions on the wheel, on the Irish wheel. So is there, when you're telling the stories about the Irish wheel, the spinning of the wheel, the life of it, to me, is it right to say that there's a balance between the male stories and the female stories on the wheel?
For me, personally, I started with the female stories, the women's stories, because the goddesses came to me at different times in my life and worked with me. So, for example, Clucta at Samhain, which is for you the Northwest. It's for all of us the Northwest, but we would call it Samhain. She was with me for a number of years, and I journeyed with her, and she really took me through things. So I got to know her. I got to know her within an intimate level within myself. And then the other goddesses subsequently came to me at different times. Because I work mainly with women, that holds us, because they are the archetypes. They're the archetypes for us. I'm now cultivating the male stories, the stories of Lou, the stories of Man and Natalia, the stories of the Green Man, Dean Carrick. I'm now cultivating, and I'm asking permission for them to share their stories with me, so that I can offer that to the men, and they can begin to journey there. And,
my goodness!
Draw that upon themselves.
All right, I have to share this with our audience. I didn't know that you were doing that. The question that I asked just now is because I was being prompted by my own spiritual team about asking about the stories on the wheel, because in the classes I've been in with you and on the tours, all the stories have been about the goddess or goddesses. And so when they wanted me to ask about the male stories, I didn't know where that was taking us. I didn't know. So you're beginning that part of the journey then.
Yes, and for me, what is very important is her story.
Yes,
her story rather than his story. His story, which is history, his story is the story of the conquerors. And that's the story that's in the books, in his story books.
Yes.
That's the stories we've been given.
Right.
And there's a huge amount of stories that are not there. And so we are reawakening her story. And in awakening her story, we're also awakening the balance. So his stories have to come along gradually with that too.
Yes.
And so, for the last, say, 33 years of my life, I've been very much working on her story, following her path. And she's been calling me the Great Mother, but also the Kaliak, the crone, the hag, because everything comes back to her. Everything comes back to her. Yeah. And now balancing that with his story. What is his story beyond being either the hero or the one that dies on the cross? Where are his archetypes? And so that's very important to be able to bring that forward too, because men are looking for something more. They know instinctively, they feel instinctively, that there's more. And there's a lot of men out there wanting to bring balance into their nature. They want to bring that balance of the feminine and the grace, the gentleness. And also they are a man in a man's body. So they need the balance of both. They need to be able to understand the balance of both. So embracing both is important.
Right.
And that's another journey again. And that's quite an exciting journey.
Yes, it is. And, the stories that have been handed down from one generation to another, it's amazing to me that the ancient ones knew this. And that's why there's so many stories that can be shared and passed down into modern day.
And the importance of the stories, Neshi, the importance of them. I mean, in our tradition here, it's always been so important to share the stories. And the older ones, the elders, as they get nearer and nearer to their time, they begin to tell the same stories over and over again because it's so important that we know these stories.
Yes.
During the time of the Great Famine, when, 3/5 of our population either died or had to emigrate, the one person in the village who was the strongest, who they would be sending, and the whole village would collect everything, then anything they had to make sure they could buy a ticket for them to go to America or to Canada. He or she would have to go to everybody's house and listen to their stories, every family. They would have to listen to all those stories before they could travel, because those families knew that once they were gone, their stories were gone with them. And so a lot of these people traveled carrying all these stories, the ache of that. Travel down through the generations. And so when a lot of people come to Ireland who have Irish heritage, they don't understand often why. They feel this ache, this pull, how this land really pulls at them, and the tears that they carry or the ache that they carry, because they're bringing the souls home. They're bringing those stories back to the land. Yeah. To imagine how important it was for them that they had to listen to all those stories.
I know. Just listening to that, there's a part of me that feels joyful that those stories through those souls can return home,
Yes.
And yet I also, it makes me feel emotionally sad because of why they had to leave. Why they had to leave their families and their land to come here. Well, and it was survival, really. Survival.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was survival. And also shamanically, the stories will awaken in you the DNA, the memories of the stories you carry yourself. Right. And how you can access your own stories, and what patterns do you carry in honor of your ancestors, and how does that unfold within you? Yes. So stories can be very deep on that.
And that's why we're doing this interview with you about storytelling and female storytellers, because it's important. It's important to our growth, our spiritual growth. and to recall those memories that we hold.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I'm just looking at the time. We have about 20 minutes or so. I was hoping, as I was sitting here thinking about this, if you had to, and I know this is going to be a kind of a hard question, as a storyteller and holding all those stories, do you have a favorite one?
Do you have a favorite one?
Yeah. It's like trying to pick out which is your favorite child. I know.
Yeah, I don't know if I do, because they all come up at different times to what is relevant. And they all carry their own power within them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, words are power.
Yes, they are.
They all carry them within them. But I'm thinking of one right now, which isn't too long if you want to hear it.
Yes, please.
Okay. And it's an old story. It goes back through time. But is really just a breath away. And it goes back to a time when we had a well, which was a well of wisdom. And this well was up between what is known now as the north and the south, literally on the border. And in the well, we had a great sun. And around the well, we had 9 hazel trees. And the nuts of the hazel tree would often fall into the well, which imbued it with even greater wisdom. And people would come from far and wide to drink from the well. And times changed, as times do. And new people came onto the land. And these new people heard about this well. And they came up to the well and they saw that everybody was drinking from the well. And they thought, they shouldn't be drinking from the well. Only the greatest of our people should be drinking from the well. Our druids should be drinking from that well. And so they outlawed the well to the people. But the people weren't allowed to drink from the well anymore. And only the greatest of the druids could drink from the well and imbue the great wisdom that the well held. And every night they would have 4 young people sitting around the well, protecting the well, making sure that nobody drank from it. And the weeks turned into years. And one night, when these 4 young people were sitting around the well, they could hear these great claps of thunder in the background. And they looked at each other and they thought, oh, Jesus, now it'll be a wet night tonight. When they looked up through the trees, the sky was clear. They could see all the stars in the darkness of the moon. And they thought, gosh, where is that thunder coming from? And they could hear that thunder getting louder and louder. And as it got louder and louder, they could hear this crushing sound too. And before they knew it, this woman appeared before them. And she was 10 foot if she was an inch. And around her wrists and around her ankles, she had shells that crackled and sparkled as she moved. And her hair was thick and green, and it fell all over her naked body. And she stared at them and she laughed. And before they knew it, she had thrown herself down into the well. They didn't know what to do. They looked at each other and they were so shocked, and they stepped back. And good thing that they did, because as they stepped back, they heard the water beginning to bumble and bubbled and creaked and bubbled, getting louder and louder. And suddenly the water began to flow out from the well, and all the stones that they had placed around the well began to fall away, and the water continued to rise and flow down the land. And as it flowed down, they saw the great salmon of wisdom flowing down with the water. And then they saw this great, huge woman flowing out as she flew down with the water. And the water began to flow and move like a snake all the way down onto the land of Ireland. And it came out at Limerick Bay. And they called the river Shannon.
Oh, the
in honor of the great sea goddess Shannon.
The Shannon. That is a great story. The Shannon.
The Shannon River.
Thank you for that. Because I don't think I've ever heard that particular story about the Shannon. That was great. I loved it. I used to love sitting and listening to my Misho, my grandfather, tell us stories. But, his stories were always about usually a moral to the story, right? Which really meant that one of us had done something wrong, and he was really trying to tell us that we should behave in a certain way. But he never said who did what wrong, so we had to kind of take a look at each other and say, okay, who did it this time, right? But to listen to the stories is you also use a certain word quite often. You use the word weave. And yes. I think the stories, whenever we hear them, it does weave us together. I believe so.
Yes, me too. Yeah. Me too.
They're saying thank you in the chat room for the story.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Now, we get a few more minutes. I was going to ask you, I know that you have some classes going on, and I was hoping that you would share with us, where can people find you? I will put your website address in the chat room so people have it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, so you will find it on my website, and I don't know if I've got the autumn itinerary up yet. I'm a terror for getting it out there because I'm busy doing what I'm doing rather than putting that on. But I have a pilgrimage in September, starting September the 22nd, and and this one is women only. 2 of the women are actually cancelled. If anybody is interested, you can see that on my website, CelticSoulJourneys.com. And I have workshops in Michigan, one in Brighton in Michigan and one in Lowell, which is an apprentice week, which is the one that Rob and Margaret are going to be at.
Mm-hmm.
And then I am working in North Carolina. I'm doing one in Asheville for women only, and then one in Charlotte, which is a mixed group, and then on to Bozeman in Montana, and lastly down to Florida to Fort Lauderdale.
Wow.
And then home again.
So literally from, I can't remember the first date, August, September, no?
I'm coming over in October.
Mm-hmm. And
so
go ahead.
October will be the 2 Michigan months. Then the very end of October, Samhain time, will be the one in Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
And then the following week will be the one in Charlotte.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then on to Bozeman, Montana.
Yeah.
And then lastly down to Fort Lauderdale in Florida. I always go there last because of the weather.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's usually November, December, right?
That's, exactly. It'll be November, mid to the late end of November. I once did it the other way around, and I wouldn't do that.
I was just going to say, I think I remember when you did, was it Massachusetts or in November or something like that? And it was really cold.
It was actually Wisconsin. That was a bit of a shock. And even now I was in Bozeman, Montana in March, and my goodness, it was quite magical, to be honest, to see such snow, and how thick it fell.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have you back in Wisconsin at some point. Maybe not in 2018, but maybe 2019 for sure. Rob is asking, what's happening in Brighton?
Brighton, there's one of my apprentices, Kim. She has a centre there, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a workshop or if it's going to be an apprentice gathering of apprentices that I've been working with now for 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of in the air at the moment. She was doing a workshop there, but the apprentices would like to meet up again. They have been working together now for 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be doing that there. So that's not solidified yet. But if you're interested, you might want to connect with Kim anyway and her partner Bobby. I'm actually marrying them next year.
You
which
are?
Is exciting. I am. I'm
Yay.
coming over to marry.
Good for them.
And both of them have worked with me over the years, and both have come here, and actually they're coming again next month with Bobby's family, with Bobby's adult children. So, yeah, if you're living near there, Rob, you might want to connect with them anyway, because there's other things going on there, and they're a lovely couple.
And are they on Facebook? Is there some their last name or something?
I have to look. Do you know?
Oh, okay.
Kim Wilkinson, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Kim Wilkerson.
Yes.
As soon as you said it, I thought, that's it.
Yes. And I'm not sure if she has a Facebook page for the place yet.
But she's in Brighton.
Wilkinson, Wilkinson.
I-N.
Kimberly. It's actually down as Kimberly Wilkinson. But I will mention to her that she should set up a web page just for the centre. Okay.
Well, I'm going to put it in the comment in the chat, Rob. And if you can, I'm sure you can find her. And if she has a center, you'd think that it would be listed somewhere. So.
Well, it's only begun.
Oh, really?
I think I'm the only one so far that's done work there. Oh, and they did have a crystal workshop there. I'm not sure about something else, but yes. So she works full time also, and so probably, it's the legalities of actually spending time to get a website set up.
Yep, it takes time, lots of time and effort, and to set up a website, you think it's going to take X amount of time, and it always takes so much more.
Oh gosh, yes. Yes, I had this naive idea that they were going to do it, and I was going to just say thank you. It doesn't work like that at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. You got to come up with all that text.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. I know that, it's early evening for you now in Ireland. When is the next tour that you have coming up that you're going to be taking people on? Pilgrimage.
Yes, I'm doing one in June, which is actually a woman is bringing a group over, Terry O'Hara. She's an animal communicator. Oh. And she brings groups over, so I'm facilitating that. And then my own tour is in September, the 22nd of September. And then next year, I've been asked to do a couple tour. And I've got a couple of other groups that have asked me to facilitate their tour next year. And so I haven't actually set any dates for my own yet for next year. Well, that's something I should do.
As a suggestion for those people wanting to come over to do the pilgrimage or a tour, of course, I would suggest going to your tour, but also the time of year makes a difference.
Yes.
September, October seems to be really good months to be able to do that. It's a little bit cooler, and the rainy season doesn't start quite yet in September, right?
Do you know, Neshi, we've had so many weather changes. It's really hard to navigate our way through it. Yeah. In the last few years, I don't think nature herself knows what's going on.
Oh, my goodness.
Normally, April, May, June would be good months. And this year this winter we've had a very, very wet winter up until just about 3 weeks ago. We didn't have one day without rain since last August. So it's been a hard winter for people here. Yeah. The weather changes are quite dramatic in Ireland.
Yeah. Well, you guys are right on the Gulf Stream.
We're a small country and we're being hit from the east by from Europe, and on the west from North America, and we are getting battened down from those things. Yeah.
Well, and something happened there not too long ago that I was shocked at, and you guys had a blizzard.
Oh, we did. We did, and we had almost a hurricane, 133 mile an hour winds. And we're having winds like we've never had before. So, we're really seeing, and the wet weather has really affected the farmers. For the first time, they had to actually get hay in from England and France for the cattle. The cattle weren't able to go out into the fields as early as normal because it was just so wet. Everything is about, even the hawthorn, the blackthorn and the hawthorn were about a month behind in flowering. So it is quite interesting. But now, I mean, actually, I'm going to take a photo and send it to you from my view, because it is such a beautiful day today, such a beautiful evening.
Yeah.
It's really food for the soul. Looking out at my green fields.
Oh my goodness. Oh, and by the way, that reminds me, I told Mom that you and I were going to be doing this interview this afternoon. And so she wanted me to make sure that I told you hello and that she wishes you well.
Thank you. Please send her my love.
I certainly will.
I think of her often, and I have the earrings that she gifted me.
Well, she was telling me about the picture that you'd sent about you had sent it to me through, I think it was Facebook. The view out your door, your window of the mountain.
Yes.
And so she likes to look at that one when she talks about you.
Well, that's what I'm looking at right now as I'm talking to you. I'm looking at beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer than I have to, Amantha. I know you're very busy. There's lots of good things that Amantha's doing, and we're going to be seeing much more of her and hearing about, she's putting together a book, she tells me. So I can't wait for that. I'm going to be reading that. Will you be having pictures with that too in your book?
There will be some paintings, mainly done by Helen O'Sullivan, who is one of the apprentices. And also there will be connections in the book where you can go onto a website and you can journey. And there might even be some stories.
Oh my goodness. That's good.
I know.
Yay.
It's exciting.
Yay. Have you ever done a record? I mean, I know that in classes you have your recording of your classes where you tell the stories, but have you ever done just a recording just of the stories?
That's next. The woman who's ghostwriting with me, Orla, that's what she wanted to do first, the stories, and I said no. The teachings have to come first. So once this book is completed, then we will go into the stories and we will record the stories. But it was more important for me to get the teachings down because I didn't want to pass on with these teachings starting to sleep again, starting to, I want these out.
Right.
I want them out. So that's very important to me.
Well, and it's very important to us too, because we appreciate all the work that you and your ghostwriter is putting into this book. I think it's an important piece of literature that's going to come out that's going to help a lot of people. I really do. So,
thank you.
Yeah. Only because I've sat in those classes and I know. Amantha, do you have any questions for us or anything you'd like to say in parting words for us?
I would say to you, if you are lucky enough to still have elders in your family, ask them their stories. The stories of when they were young, how they first fell in love, what they felt when they had their children, and record the stories. Because when the elders are gone, they've gone. And the stories will go with them. And it's so sad. And at some point in your life, you will be asked about those stories, whether it's your own grandchildren or grandnephews and nieces. You don't want those stories to be lost because they're precious and they're very personal to your family. They're very personal to your bloodline. So ask them the stories and the stories of their people. What do they remember of their parents and grandparents? Where did they come from? How did they travel? Where did they live? How did they survive? It's so important to honor these stories. And when you hear those stories, you'll be surprised how often something in you will resonate to that. You say, oh, I remember feeling that. I remember going through that. That's where I got it from. It helps you to weave yourself whole again.
Weave yourself whole again. I love that. Through the stories. Amantha, thank you so much. We appreciate it. And you taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure and my blessing.
And blessings to you too. Thanks a lot. Goodbye.
Thank you. Take care.
Yep. And everybody, there you go. And everyone, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to this interview and to the stories. And if you're listening to this as a recording, we appreciate that too. So with that, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you back here on our regular time, which is 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for Star Nations Communications from Home next week, Tuesday night. And we're going to be doing the Unity Breath Meditation next week. So we'll see you then. Ba Mamina, until we see each other again.